All right, this is Evan Ginzburg of WBAI FM's Light Show in New York City and Wrestling Then and Now, and you're listening to the Interactive Interview.
Interactive Wrestling Radio.
Hello everybody and welcome back to the Interactive Interview. We just finished up with Don Cyrus Callis. Don gave us a lot of great backstage information about himself, both on and off camera. And if you're wondering, our partner Daniel is not on the line right now. All lovely females, do not shed a tear. Daniel can be heard in the next hour, basically doing an interview with Evan Ginzburg of WBAI Radio, also of WrestlingThenAndNow.com. So check it out. Evan is probably not the biggest name in the world, but if you want to hear a quality interview, he definitely gives you that. Being an on-air personality just like us, actually quite a bit more professional than us. It's Dan and I tend to screw around quite a bit more. Evan gives us a lot of information about everything that he's done, all the interviews that he's done, about the Johnny Valiant stuff that he's a part of, and Johnny was a great guest on our show. So once again, stay tuned for the Evan Ginzburg interview, and after that, I come back for a couple seconds, and I know you all want to hear what I have to say. So come back, and this is now, we're heading off to Evan Ginzburg. Take it away, Evan.
Hello, this is Johnny Storm, and you're listening to the Interactive Interview.
Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of the Interactive Interview on the interactiveinterview.com. I'm James Walsh, joined as always by Daniel Edler with our special guest, Evan Ginzburg.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Doing pretty good. Dan, would you like to take the first question?
How are you doing, Evan?
Good. Very excited. We're out promoting Johnny Valiant's new show, and it's coming to New York in a couple of days, and it's just hectic, but, creative, fun. It's good. All good.
Excellent. Okay, well, we'll start by just finding out some background on yourself before we talk about Johnny Valiant. So, can you give us some background on how you became involved with the business and how long you've been involved?
Well, I've been doing Wrestling Then and Now newsletter for the past 13 years, which is almost a miracle in zine years. It's kind of like dog years. And we've put out 150 issues in a dozen or so magazines, and basically we chronicle the history of the sport. We've had contributors like Killer Kowalski, Honky Tonk Man, Johnny Valiant, Nikolai Volkov, Don, Dr. Death Arnold. I don't know how young you guys are, but some of these guys go way back, and it's living history. It's almost oral history, straight from the horse's mouth, and basically we complement the interviews with rare clips, rare photos, original artwork. And not just the wrestlers themselves, also wrestling historians, wrestling fans, and it's a labor of love. I've never lived off of it, but we put it out month after month, and over the years we've interviewed Bruno, Thez, Gagne, Bockwinkel, Ivan Koloff, and it's a thrill for me even at this point, to sit down and meet with or talk over the phone with some of the legends that I grew up seeing as a kid. I'm working now with Johnny Valiant. We've done shows with Nikolai Volkov, and when I was 14 years old, sitting in Madison Square Garden, I was in awe of these guys, and to know them as friends and human beings, as opposed to supervillains and superheroes, it's a beautiful thing.
One of the questions we often get asked are who are our favorites and least favorite interviews. What we're going to do right now is pitch you that same question.
Oh, okay. That's a very good question because I've been on WBAI FM in New York City. It's a show called Light Show, and I've done, an arts program for 10 years with a gentleman named Fred Giabold. And over the years, we've interviewed hundreds, if not thousands, of not just wrestlers, but, writers, artists, comedians, improv people. And, it's hard to say who your favorite is. Off the top of my head, I once spent a New Year's Eve 3 in the morning we used to do this show. Now we're on 2 p.m., but we used to be on 3 a.m. live, Lou Thez, bringing in the new year. This had to be like 1996 or 97. It's all a blur. I was just like, this is a nice way to bring in the new year. You know, Lou Thez live on the radio, answering questions from the callers, and Fez had his shtick. He was, very, anti-Bruno and anti-rocker and all of this. But, just that a guy would be on the radio with us 3 in the morning live like that, a man of that stature was great. Also, I really loved interviewing Sherry Martel, who
we're desperately trying to get on the show, by the way.
Great interview. Great interview.
Trust me, I've been trying to convince Dan to this for the past 2 weeks now.
She said to me that she spent her entire adult life on the road. She woke up one day and her little kid was, 15 years old all of a sudden, and how heartbreaking it is not to see your kid grow up and the sacrifices you make and, the physical and emotional, pain you go through traveling 250, 300 days a year. To this day, I meet so many fans because I'm constantly on the road with Johnny Valiant, and we meet so many fans who think it's so glamorous, and they think all the wrestlers are incredibly wealthy, which is, absurd. I mean, if you really know the deal, especially with the old-timers. And, somebody like Sherry Martel, she sacrificed her adult life for this business, and she was a great interview. As far as terrible interviews,
you don't have to say wrestling if it's somebody else.
Yeah. I once remember we had a live band on, young guys, and I said, it's 3 in the morning, and, there's 7 guys in the band. I don't even remember their names, so I'm kind of like, why don't you guys all introduce yourselves? So one guy, it must have taken him 15 seconds to open his mouth and go, Bob. This was the entire interview, So, sometimes you get guys that just choke, live on the radio. And another great interview, believe it or not, is a current indie guy, Lowlife Louis Ramos. He's one of the, hardcore kings
I've heard of him.
In the New York area. This guy can talk, You never know 1 second to the next what's going to come out of his mouth. Some of it's X-rated, but this guy's colorful and a great talker, and... I would say off the top of my head, those guys were great. Kowalski's very colorful. What's interesting about Kowalski is he's very shy in person, and he won't even talk to you unless you talk to him. But once you get started, I mean, it's one great story after another, and he could just go on for 45 minutes. You don't even have to ask a question. Just great radio. Yeah, if you ever want a great interview, I'll get you Kowalski's number.
Before we go on to talk about the upcoming Johnny Valiant tour, just like to finish off this part of the interview with asking you if there's anybody out there that you haven't had the chance to interview. Who would it be and why?
Well, believe it or not, after all these years, I still haven't interviewed Terry Funk. I've asked once or twice, and he actually responded by saying, if I get on the radio, I always am 100% honest, and that's why I don't want to get on the radio, which is interesting. I guess at this point he doesn't want to burn bridges, and, some guys are so honest sometimes they hurt themselves. I've yet to interview Harley Race for whatever reason. It just hasn't happened. I'm looking at my childhood heroes. I'd like to interview Dory Funk Jr. because, I can't think of too many guys that were better than him. There's always people that you haven't interviewed. I would say off the top of my head, because these guys are just like wrestling gods, and they're on the stature of, some of the people I have had the chance to deal with, like Gagne and Bockwinkel and Bruno. So, I would say those are at the top of the list. And we're an arts program. I mean, I've interviewed plenty of, real-life, quote-unquote real-life celebrities like Cyndi Lauper. And, there's always guys who you put on a pedestal like George Clinton and Al Green and James Brown, who I've yet to speak with. So, you always have goals as a broadcaster.
I'm from the New York area. What station are you on?
WBAI, 99.5 FM. It's called Light Show, and we're on Wednesdays at 2. And on September 3rd and September 10th, we're going to have Johnny Valiant on. So if anybody wants to get a piece of his show, they could hear it live. And they could hear worldwide on the internet at WBAI.org and WBAIfree.org if you're not in the New York, New Jersey area.
Okay, cool. Dan, would you like to take the next one?
We have Johnny Valiant as an upcoming guest on the interactive interview. And by the time this interview goes out, he may well have been on, so you can probably check out his interview in the archive section on the website. But can you give us some more information for the people listening that want to find out about the Johnny Valiant tour? And can you give us information on how you started working with Johnny?
Oh, okay. I actually was involved in a very interesting educational program. I would bring wrestlers into this junior high school that I was teaching in, and the wrestlers would talk to the kids, stay in school, don't do drugs, don't drink, that kind of thing, keep away from steroids. And, over the course of 4 terms or 2 school years, we had Nikolai Volkov and Johnny and, Nicole Bass, as well as tons and tons of indie guys from the area come to meet the kids. And, it was just a great program. And one of the guests was Johnny Valiant, who came with a filmmaker, Mark Azovsky, who's shooting a documentary on him. And basically, we just hit it off. And, he was telling me he was having a hard time, getting the comedy show on the road. And, over 10 years of doing New York radio, I developed a lot of contacts. And just one thing led to another, and I helped them get a few bookings, and it led to more bookings and more. And suddenly, you're my manager. And, it just was, it just sort of evolved. And at this point, we've had runs where we've had 15, 16 bookings in a 30-day period. Indie work, private parties, library gigs, corporate gigs. It's just really blossomed because he's a likable guy and he's a great talker, as you'll see when you interview him. And he legitimately likes the fans. He likes people, which not all celebrities do, So, we did a bachelor party a couple of weeks ago. It's just interesting the places you get to doing this sort of thing. So, just evolved to the point where now we're going into a legitimate theater in New York, which is a great opportunity, theater for the new city. And this theater has had work by Tim Robbins and Sam Shepard, and it had a Pulitzer Prize-winning production and a 40 Obie Award-winning productions for off-Broadway, and it's just a great opportunity, and we're going to be running 3 weekends starting September 5th through September 21st, and we're really excited about it. Time Out New York is doing a feature on us, and we're just out there publicizing it and hoping that people come down.
Can we just get information on where the fans can go to online to get maybe get tickets to the event?
Oh, sure. Theaterforthenewcity.net is selling advance tickets. There's a page specifically for Johnny's show, and for information on Johnny in general, they could check out johnnyvaliant.net or my site, wrestlingthenandnow.com. And the show itself, I don't want to go too deeply into it because I'm sure Johnny will, but it's not only about his wrestling career and being on the road with legends like Andre and Bruno, but it's about what 30 years on the road does to your marriage and family and body and psyche. You don't really have to be a wrestling fan to enjoy it. It is theatrical. It's not just the guy standing up there telling jokes. It's poignant. We've gotten some great reviews, and we're hoping to just take it to the next level. And being in a legitimate New York theater is something that no wrestler has ever done before. So we're very excited about it.
You mentioned to me on the phone a couple minutes ago that you just got off the phone with a movie producer.
Yeah, this is a project that I can't really publicize yet, but in the very near future there will be a wrestling-related film, not a documentary, an actual film. But I've been asked, not to really publicize it because, in Hollywood, ideas tend to be taken, putting it bluntly. So
right.
You know, I really, that's about all I could say about it. But it's like anything else. We're hoping it comes to fruition. We're hoping it all falls into place. You know, Hollywood is a crapshoot. You know, things work out incredibly well, like, you know, Matt Damon and his buddy there, and you hit the jackpot, and other things just don't come off. So we're keeping our fingers crossed and doing whatever we can to, you know, get this thing going.
You have a website called Wrestling Then and Now. What is your opinion of wrestling today?
I could probably do 2 hours on wrestling today because I'm constantly at indie shows with Johnny, and I see the good and bad of it. Let's put it to you this way: there are guys out there that are just amazing. You know, Homicide, Low Key, Red, etc., etc. There are some great workers out there. At the same time, you know, there's, for the most part, the business has become so open that anybody and his mother could become a wrestler at this stage. They'll go to a wrestling school. They'll be trained wrong. They'll be trained incorrectly by another guy who's inexperienced. I've sat with pros who have just grimaced. They're going, you know, this guy could get killed out there because they don't know what they're doing. In many cases, there's no sense of psychology. You know, 8 seconds into the match, there's a high spot. They're, you know, flying around like, you know, like luchadors almost. And, you know, sometimes it's just overkill. And I've been on shows where there are literally 15 matches, you know, 2,000 high spots, 87 chair shots. You know, the music is blaring. You have a pounding headache. And I've been to shows in New York that have run 5 or 6 hours, and there's 80 guys in the dressing room.
Right.
You know, and you know, and at the end of the night, I could probably give you 3 results. The rest is a blur, and you know, you feel like you're shell shocked. You know, like you just went through combat, and you know. Like I said, I've seen, you know, Jerry Lynn have just beautiful matches, and Homicide, who I'm a huge fan and supporter of, and you know, Low Key. You know, some of these guys, I was one of the first people to ever interview them, ever put them on the radio, and you know, then of course the rest of the wrestling media picked up on them, and I'm happy for them. I'm legitimately happy for them. But there are guys in these shows that just don't belong out there at this point, and I don't know how aware people are of the behind-the-scenes finances and stuff, but a lot of these wrestlers are on the shows because they're selling tickets. You know, the promoter's like, you sell 20 tickets, I'll put you on the show. So they'll sell $400 worth of tickets, and the promoter gives them $40. You
Right.
know, it's almost you know, bizarre. And you see a guy, you know, I make a living really as an English teacher. All this other stuff I do on the side. I teach English to adults, and you know, I'm a 43-year-old English teacher. I look more like a wrestler than some of these kids out there. You know what I'm saying? I'm 6'2", 205.
Right.
And I see a guy, he's like, you know, 15 years old, and he's 137 pounds soaking wet. I'm like, this guy's a wrestler, you know? It's like, it's kind of odd, but
Well, you just mentioned what you think of the indie scene, but what do you think of the on-air things like NWA, TNA, if you've seen any, or the WWE?
I've seen NWA, TNA many times, and I think it has a lot of the pluses and the minuses I just mentioned. Basically, you know, it's an indie. It's an indie that's $9.95 a week, and it's. I've seen some great stuff on there, and I've seen some stuff that you know, just does nothing for me. I understand basically they're the guys that WWE, you know, don't want or don't need or whatever, and you know, it has its pluses and minuses. AJ Styles and Low Key and Jerry Lynn have had some great matches, and again, you know, if you had some of those very same shows, you know, 10 minutes from my house at the Elks Lodge, I don't know if I'd pay to go see it. You know, I have very mixed emotions about it. I see the pluses, I see the minuses. I'm not a big fan of Vince Russo. I think it really, a lot of his stuff appeals to...
That's surprising, since you sound quite a bit like him, actually.
Well, that's the New York accent. You see, as an ESL teacher, if my students speak as poorly as I do with the Brooklyn accent by the end of June, I know I've accomplished something. But, yeah. You know, I don't see... Let me put it to you this way. I don't need to spend money to see, girls in bathing suits. I want to see a good wrestling match. That's just the way I am. I don't like some of the very lowbrow angles, the lowest common denominator that a guy like Russo generally tries to appeal to. Just doesn't do much for me. Back in WCW when, one guy would be fighting for the title and he would just lay down on his back and the other guy would pin him. It just cheapens the title to give it to a movie star. It's just cheap, I'm from, back in the day, Dory Funk Jr. against Jack Briscoe, where, even though it was work, it felt like a sport. It felt like it was important. The title meant something, and you'll turn on Raw or SmackDown, and somebody is winning the title for the 16th time or something. It's a little absurd. It kind of cheapens it. Back when I was a kid, Bruno had the title 8 years, or Harley Race or Terry Funk or somebody would have the title for years at a time, where it really, really meant something. And do you care who holds the Intercontinental title? I mean, does it have the least bit of importance? If you put down $1,000 on the table in front of me, and I put out a wrestling newsletter, I couldn't tell you who the WWE champions are. I absolutely couldn't. I mean, because it's so meaningless. It's a blur to me, an absolute blur. Now, at the same time, giving credit where it's due, I love to watch a guy like Eddie Guerrero or Chris Benoit. I don't know what happened to Dean Malenko. They sort of phased him out. But
I think he's working backstage now.
Yeah, but why? Why wouldn't a great wrestler like him be out there? They don't have a place for him? Isn't that a little ridiculous? I wish, as an old school fan and as a quote-unquote wrestling journalist, they would just put on Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit, let them go 20, 25 minutes without the run-ins, without, the TNA. And I think you could reschool some of the fans to appreciate great wrestling. I don't know if you guys remember in ECW when Eddie Guerrero and Dean Malenko went the hour. I mean,
absolutely.
Beautiful.
Absolutely remember that match.
Beautiful. Right. That's when you're proud to be a wrestling fan. I was at the Garden when Tiger Mask wrestled Dynamite Kid.
Wow.
You'd be proud to be a wrestling fan. I mean, as an educator, I have to almost apologize to people I work with. Oh yeah, not all wrestling is like, what you see on WWE, why do you have to be apologetic about something that deep down you really love, that you spend a lot of time involved with? It's really a shame. It's really a shame. Am I talking your ear off?
No, actually,
you want to sneak some questions in?
No, actually, we're enjoying this.
Oh, good.
Daniel, do you have a question?
Indeed. You also mentioned to me in a couple of emails that you're also working with other clients involved in the wrestling business. Who do these involve?
I book Nicole Bass. We've done various videos and indie wrestling shows, and she's a lovely person. And on Howard Stern, they sort of portray her as a character, but she's a very sensitive, nice person in real life. And I've booked her, on many occasions. Nikolai Volkov is a personal friend. I don't technically manage him or anything like that, but when we can, we work together. And I've booked Kowalski for certain autograph signings and videos and things of that nature, and worked with him on a book project that he did a couple years ago. And it's funny. There's a certain irony to it, and I'm sure a psychiatrist would have a field day to it, but the heels in general, the legendary heels,
are the nice guys. Right.
The faces, it's just the way it is. For some reason, the faces needed the adulation. They needed the applause, whereas the heels enjoyed, acting for all intents and purposes, because guys like Kowalski and Johnny Valiant and Nikolai, they're just lovely people in real life. So I know I'm sort of touching upon this very quickly, but that's been my observation.
Before we come to the conclusion of the interview, I'd like to know where can fans find out more information about yourself, and what does the future hold for you?
Well, they could go to WrestlingThenAndNow.com. It has all the information on the newsletter, and Johnny and Nikolai, and all the projects I'm involved with, and various merchandise and subscription information and all of that. As far as the future, knowing the way the wrestling business operates, I'm in no way, shape, or form giving up my day job, which is why I continue to teach part-time and keep my hand in the wrestling-related activities at the same time. Taking an evening with Johnny Valiant to Theater for the New City is a big step for us, and hopefully we could take it to bigger and better venues and, take it. We've gone as far as 400 miles away with it, up to Jamestown, which is like an hour and a half, 2 hours from Toronto. So, we'd like to take the show on the road, if possible. We could, theoretically, you could do every major city in the country and internationally, once a show has, enough good, reviews, which we have at this point, but you always want to build on it. And, basically, in life, you always want to, have the next challenge. I'm putting out a book on growing up in Brooklyn. I grew up in Brooklyn in the 1960s and 70s, very turbulent times, and it's a collection of 47 or 48 short stories. That's an upcoming project. I want to do a best of my newsletter. We have 13 years of, interviews with legends and, wrestling historians going back to literally the turn of the century. And, I think there's a anthology there that I'd like to get out. And, there's always another challenge, but there's only so many hours of the day, and you have family and friends and a girlfriend and, a life outside of wrestling and everything else as well. So you just keep chugging along, and take one step at a time. And, just life is good all in all. It has its problems, but off the subject, I always tell people, do what you love and the money will follow later. There are too many people out there working 9 to 5s, doing something they hate. They did a poll years ago, 84% of Americans hate what they do. And when you see people at rush hour, you see it in their faces. They're exhausted, they're beaten, they're stressed. I wake up every morning, I go teach. I love teaching adults. I teach adults ESL. I love working with Johnny. I love doing the newsletter. I love doing radio. You piece it all together. You make a living. You're not rich, but, you're doing creative things with fascinating people, and, life is good. You only go around once. If you're not happy with your job, leave it. If you're not happy with your marriage or relationship, go to counseling. If it doesn't work, move on. There's too many unhappy people out there. So, I basically, that's my philosophy. I don't want to beat it to death for your listeners, but, I hope they get something out of it.
Mm.
James, do you have any other questions?
Actually, I was thinking of one that I just had in my mind, but I just forgot it.
Okay, I've got one more.
Thank you.
People, I'm sure Johnny will be able to answer this as well, but can people, say, international viewers, such as myself, will you be releasing any form of video footage or etc. just to...
We have right now a documentary called Luscious Johnny the Wrestler. A filmmaker named Nick Otto did it. Very good film, again, with a lot of feeling. It's not just wrestling. It's basically, what do when you wake up, you're 45 years old, you're no longer, on the road with the WWE. I mean, do you get a 9 to 5? Do you, it's a really nice quality documentary that goes beyond wrestling. But we have every intention of releasing, a film version of An Evening with Johnny Valiant as well. It's, Johnny's kind of a perfectionist. I'm always like, Johnny, you ready to do this? You want to get this on tape? There's somebody in Washington, Oregon that wants to see this show. They can't get to New York. And he's like, no, let's hone it. Let's hone it. That's the kind of guy he is, which I respect also. It's not just about money. I mean, if you knew the finances of an off-Broadway show in the East Village, nobody's getting rich from this. Nobody's getting rich, believe me. But it's, you're pouring your soul for an audience every night, and it's a beautiful thing, and you meet great people. You also meet some, jerks along the way, some promoters, wrestling promoters, but all in all, it's a great feeling to get out there and do something creative, do something that's really never been done before, if you think about it. I mean, there's been a million shoot videos, there's been, countless wrestling documentaries, but there's never been a wrestling legend, and Johnny would certainly qualify. The man sold out the Garden 4 times in 1 year. He's a WWF Hall of Famer that's gotten on a stage, a legitimate stage, and poured their guts out. I mean, it's just never been done. And I just want to say something. I really appreciate your support. I mean, I have no idea how many listeners you have. It doesn't matter. I appreciate your support because I'll pick up a wrestling sheet or check out a wrestling website, and they'll go into like 18 paragraphs on why Kevin Nash got a haircut. And here's Johnny Valiant, talking about the history of this business and what it does, to your family and your life. I don't want to be repetitive. And some people, they just don't see it. They don't, on a legitimate stage that Sam Shepard has appeared on, they don't see that this is something of importance. And it's a shame. It really is a shame. And that, you can't lead a horse to water. There are wrestling journalists, and I use the term loosely, who are semi-literate. I mean, you go to some of these websites, and, they're functioning on the level of an 8th grader, and just because you know a subject doesn't make you a writer or whatever. So, and then there are people that are very, very fine writers out there, Mike Mooneyham with the Post and Courier, and, there are some quality, legitimate writers that, can match, their work with just about anybody out there. But my point is, I feel, and of course I'm emotionally involved, but I certainly feel that a wrestler going on a legit stage and talking about the business is newsworthy. Time Out New York is going to have a feature on us, so there's one of the biggest arts publication in the world. They agree with me, but, some wrestling newsletter with 500 readers, doesn't want to give you the time of day, which is like mind-boggling to me, but, what can you do? You can't please everybody, so you just do your best and, just go about it and get as much publicity as you can and hope that people come out. And we've gone on the road with this show for the past year trying to, hone it and tighten it. And, we've had nights where there's standing room only. We've had nights where it's half empty. We've had nights that are near disastrous, so... it depends on how the promoter that books the show promotes it and everything. Sometimes you get to a venue, there's not a sign outside, I've been to indie shows with under 10 people paid, Not everybody's a quote-unquote promoter. So basically, we do what we can to make the show as, not good, as great as possible, and just get the publicity out on our own and do what we can to get people in there, and that's that's the story, really.
Do you guys ever encounter hecklers?
No. It's funny. Johnny's a very warm guy in person, and people like him, and they want him to succeed. We've had nights where somebody's been drunk, and they're too much a part of the show, like, hey, Johnny, who's your greatest opponent? And Johnny will say, my ex-wife and her divorce lawyer, And then, like, 30 seconds later, the same drunk guy will go, who's your greatest opponent? He forgot already, Stuff like that could be annoying, but, no. It's generally when it's a guy like Johnny who has a name and has some kind of following, the people are there because they want to be there. I'll tell you something. I've sat at indie shows, and I've seen indie wrestlers heckling other wrestlers, and I think that's really in poor taste. Yelling, you missed the spot or whatever. The guy's out there risking life and limb. It's really uncalled for, but I've seen it many times, and I've seen indie wrestlers that are very cocky, and they really should hone their craft before, playing to the wrestlers in the audience. Worry about the paying fans. Don't worry about the other wrestlers in the audience. But that's a totally different subject.
Well, we indeed try to. It will be indeed an honour to speak with Johnny next week, and sorry, when it comes out next week, and we will indeed try and help promote Johnny's show as much as possible, because we are of the impression and the same thinking as yourself that such a show would be way more important than who's going to play the Punisher in this and that movie.
Yeah, and you're based out of where? England, Australia?
He's in England. I'm in Arizona.
I've been to England. I've covered wrestling. I've worked with John Feltham and the FWA, and I know some of those guys over there. Nice group of guys. So, are you in touch with any of them?
I'm in touch with the FWA, but
yeah,
a couple of those guys. I spoke to Chris Nowinski. Done a couple of interviews with the FWA, including Chris Nowinski. So
I was there the night Sabu and Dan Severn and all these guys. They had a really big show over there, and there were like 1,100 people, and it was an interesting experience. I'm sure you heard about it. Yeah, Dan Severn came to England, and it was almost like Bruno. He came out in a pair of tights and wrestled. He wrestled, what's his name? Kovacs from Germany. I think his name was Kovacs. But yeah, it's interesting. The British indie scene is very similar to the American scene.
There's some absolutely wonderful talents like Johnny Storm, who we had on the show, and
Jody Fleisch. Jody Fleisch, I saw.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Doug Williams, and people like that. And
I even went to some of the small little towns where they had the WWE imitators. Guy dressed like Kane, guy dressed like The Rock. These little towns is sort of like Coney Island in Brooklyn, these little resort towns, and it was an experience. I really kind of enjoyed it. My cousin lives right outside of Liverpool, so I was there 2 summers in a row, and some of the British boys will know me. Yeah, it's I'd like to get back there soon. Nice group of guys.
We very much appreciate having you on the show.
And if I could just put over our show quickly, you mentioned it a couple minutes ago that we're having Johnny Valiant on the show, and we had you on the show to talk about his show, and things of that nature. And we've had Bruno on the show, and we've had Randy Savage and Bobby Heenan, and real legends of the business. And we've also had guys like you said that work hard, like AJ Styles and Jerry Lynn. And one thing I just want to point out to the other shows, because I know not all of them have been as open to having the legends on the show, that I started doing this because I wanted to interview the legends. I mean, I didn't do it because I wanted to do interview the flavor of the month. So I just want to say that we appreciate that you're helping us get a hold of these legends, and if there's anybody that ever needs to promote anything, the interactive interview will always be around to help those guys out.
Well, I'm sure I could get you some, legends like Nikolai or, whomever. It's, we'll stay in touch, and I'll be glad to help in any way I can. We live in a society where old is considered bad. Everything in American society is stay young, stay in shape, don't turn gray. It's a very, in different cultures, the elderly are revered. In America, anybody over the age of 40, you're no longer worthy of our attention, which is a shame. It really is a shame. There was a poll recently that said that 24% of high school graduates think America declared independence from France. I mean, they're clueless. Absolutely clueless. They're lucky they know who Elvis is. So it is great that you guys will talk to the legends, and because they're still out there. Nikolai's still wrestling. I don't know if people even are aware of this. Johnny Valiant just wrestled Jimmy Snooker a couple of weeks ago.
Wow.
Johnny took his New York City Metro card and used it as a foreign object, gouging his eyes, and the fans wanted to kill him. These guys know how to work a crowd like nobody else, and this is something that people don't realize as far as the indies. Jerry Lynn is a master, but a lot of these kids, they don't know how to work a crowd like a Jimmy Snooker or a Nikolai. And the fact that they're still out there and still, trying to make money at this, it's great that you guys keep them in the public eye, and, it's too bad. I've literally heard promoters say to some of the legends, I'm sorry we can't book you. The fans only want the ECW guys, or, as you say, the flavor of the month. And I don't know about you, but I'd certainly rather watch, a legend than the Sandman.
Yes.
That's just my personal taste. That's just who I am. I mean, ECW. I'll tell you a funny thing. Killer Kowalski was a big fan of ECW. He said, what more could people ask? These guys are killing themselves for the fans. Killing themselves. So, I certainly appreciated a lot of what ECW did. I mean, I thought some of it was a little lowbrow and over the top. And
like Flaming Tables, I think that was a little...
Well, the thing is, with the tables, once you go through 7 tables, it's not that exciting when they go through 8 tables,
Right.
It reaches a point of diminishing values. It's is the only way I could say it. If you eat 3 slices of pizza, it's fine, but by the 4th slice, it's like overkill, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's the same with Flaming Tables. And they kind of, towards the end, got away from, the Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko kind of wrestling that made them great. But if you notice in WWE, there's so many guys that went through ECW. They had a profound influence on the business, some of which is great and some of which isn't so great. But that's like anything else in life. There's a good and bad side to everything. So, I was an ECW fan. I went many times to the arena, but I'll tell you, by the end, I kind of had enough. It was just, it's just overkill. And I wish these guys the best, though. I mean, they're still out there. Balls Mahoney's wrestling my buddy Louis Ramos at the Elks Lodge this Friday, and more power to him. I wish them the best as well. What people forget about wrestling, of course it's worked. Of course, the smart fans know the deal, and they live and breathe it. But at any given moment, these guys could be crippled or killed in the ring. It happens. It happens. There was a guy...
Rick Michaels, I don't know if you ever heard of him. He was on NWA TNA one week, and literally like that weekend he got crippled, and now he pretty much does gimmicks and like costumes and stuff backstage, but he can't ever wrestle again because he hurt his neck, and and he's a young kid.
Look at
draws, even him, yeah.
There's been Japanese lady wrestlers that have died in the ring. There was a kid out in California that was killed at a training school a while back. People get very jaded. They've seen it all, and these guys are risking life and limb. And, when you sit at a show with guys like Johnny and Nikolai, they're kind of like, are they crazy? This guy could literally, get killed or crippled with that move. And what are they doing it for? They're not even on TV. They're in front of 250 people in a VFW hall, And, What's ironic about it all is I'm well, I wouldn't say friendly, but I know Jim Cornette, and he's told me the criteria that they judge. The WWE will watch any tape that's sent to them, except maybe backyard stuff, and they're looking at the working of the crowd, telling a story. They're not looking at 87 high spots. This is what these kids don't understand. They're sending them the wrong tapes. They're sending them stuff that's working against them, not for them. And, when they're judging a wrestler that wants to be in the WWE, one, it's physique and look and everything else, but it's also, can you tell a story? Can you control that crowd?
One of the things that Ted DiBiase, we talked to him for about 2 hours, not that long ago, is he kept talking about how the guys today don't have, I think his exact words were, an ear for the crowd.
Right. Another thing that you find is the crowd is calling the match instead of the wrestler,
Right.
The crowd is dictating, I want you to, jump off the balcony or whatever, and you shouldn't have to do that. Another thing, as an old school fan, I'm not big on cheap heat. I'm not big on, cursing, not that it's not like I'm against it. I mean, I love Lenny Bruce and Richard Pryor, but it just seems like it's too easy. It's too easy. You know, again, I've seen the Sandman get on the mic and go, you know, you fat whore. You know, it's like somebody pays $20. They don't want to be insulted like that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's just cheap. It cheapens the business, and you know, it's like a guy like Johnny Valiant. He'll kill the crowd with humor, with one-liners. You know, you don't have to call somebody a fat whore. You know, it's whatever. I mean, you know, I'm old school to a certain degree, and people may, you know, totally disagree with what I'm saying. But
one of the shows that does take place in New York quite often is USA Pro. Is that
yeah,
one?
I've been to many. Yeah.
Yeah, I think those shows are far too long.
Why, you don't like 6-hour wrestling shows?
Oh God, it gets to be torture after a while.
You know, it's
and plus, if you ever watch their ring too, it's not exactly the most high quality ring I've ever seen either.
It's very ironic because I've seen some great stuff with USA Pro. I've seen, you know, Low-Key and Homicide, just the same names I keep bringing up. But I have seen, by the time the main event comes out, after midnight, 40% of the crowd's gone. You know,
right?
I mean, they've had it. They're exhausted. You know,
right.
By the time every kid is, you know, match 15 comes on, match 16, you know, it's enough already, and it's too bad. It's too bad because they really do have some great talent, and it's one of the few profitable indies in the country. So. You know, I wish them all the success in the world because these guys need a place to work. I hear great things about Ring of Honor.
Right.
You know, I haven't seen them yet because they've only been in New York once, as far as I know. But whatever. You know, wrestling will survive. Wrestling will evolve. I think one day you'll have the territories again to some degree, as long as they have some kind of TV to sustain them. Everything in life is cyclical, you know, and I think having one major promotion like the WWE, you can't really consider NWA TNA competition at this point.
Right.
I think
not until they get
for the business.
Not until they get a national TV deal of some kind.
Right. They need a national TV deal, exactly, with a bigger budget and.
Or even if what I was thinking they should do is, if you remember back to ECW. Way before, the things that I remember when I think of ECW is not when ECW went to TNN. Let's shoot that idea out of the sky, because that was not really ECW. That was them, quote unquote, hot-shotting to try to please the more WWE-based fans. That was not what ECW was built on. But what I'm trying to say is, ECW was wise in that they would pay, or I think they even paid to get on like local public access shows all over the country. I remember back when I lived in New York, it was on Channel 10, which was the local channel, and that was on like 2 o'clock in the morning. But I would sit up and watch it because it was the best wrestling around it for a long time.
Right.
And I think if they did something like that, then they'd be, you know, it doesn't even have to be as good as the pay-per-views, because obviously they still want to have that to, you know, back them up. But if they can do something like that, slowly, I think they would see themselves, you know, gaining popularity and money. But I don't know. That's just my personal opinion.
I think what a promotion needs is really to reschool the fans. I don't think you could compete with WWE. You don't have the budget. You don't have the names. You know, AJ Styles could be the best wrestler, you know, on the planet, but it's not a name like The Rock or, you know, Steve Austin or Brock Lesnar. You know, there's only so much you could do. So what I would personally do is bring in the best Mexican luchadors, bring in the best Japanese wrestlers, bring in quality lady wrestlers instead of TNA. You know, just put on the best possible wrestling show you can. Forget the bad skits. You know, forget it. You know, you're not going to outdo the WWE. You don't have the budget. You know, just put on an unbelievable wrestling show and see. And you know what? Ring of Honor has been growing. They have a following. You know, I'm not saying they'll ever compete with WWE, but all I'm saying is the fans do enjoy and appreciate quality wrestling. So that's my gut instinct. I could be totally off base here, but you know, personally, that's what I would like to see. I think NWA TNA has the right idea, but you know, I think there's a certain degree of you know, concern to pop the buy rate, and there's a lot of gimmicks and
Right. And one thing they did...
Raven's House of Horrors or whatever it is, that kind of stuff.
Well, last week, I don't know if you saw it, they did a stupid thing with the casket, and it just like... It was like, well, okay, I've seen this 3 years ago in WCW. Why are you bringing it back out again? This is, And I've seen The Undertaker do it 1,000 times, and I don't think there was anybody that was like, oh my God, I never saw that before. That was just so lame.
Well, that's the thing. People are jaded at this point, and so instead of trying to outdo, I think New Jack's exciting to watch, but after he's jumped off the balcony 27 times, do you need to see it the 28th time? Why not? I like New Jack.
Well, he's not exactly a friend of the show. We had a fight with him out in the air, actually.
I'm just saying for what he does.
Yeah.
You could say the same thing about Abdul the Butcher. You could say it's not wrestling, but for what he does, it's exciting. So, I'm just saying. But when you've seen it over and over and over again,
it's a novelty act, basically.
Yeah, and it becomes overkill, and the fans do get, it's like, can you top this? So why not go to the opposite extreme, put guys in tights and, just let them wrestle. Just let them plain wrestle. And, like Eddie Guerrero, for example, I think the guy's the best all-around worker in the world. I think he could work any style. I think the guy's great.
Yes, and one thing people don't credit him for, and we talked to Sid Vicious recently, and he was talking about how some guys, they're small, and they never make you forget that they're small. Eddie Guerrero has always been, like, at the top of the card. He's never really been shut down as just a cruiserweight, and that's because he makes you forget how small he really is. I mean, he's only a 5'8" or so.
It's interesting you say that, because Johnny Valiant always says the same thing. He goes, when you're on stage, or when you're in the ring, and you're good, he says, you're 10 feet tall. He said, this is the way people perceive it. I never think of Eddie Guerrero as a little guy, because he's just so great. You just put him on a pedestal. You're absolutely right. And that's charisma. I think it's a shame, he has this ridiculous act, lie, steal, cheat, whatever. It's like, I think it's almost racist, that whole persona. But, I would just like to see Eddie Guerrero get in the ring and just wrestle, and he's great. Tajiri's great. Benoit's great. They have talent. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it. But I'll tell you, I turn it on Monday morning. I'm bored. Monday night, rather. I'm just bored. It's just too much gimmick, too much talk. Even a guy like Jericho, as talented as he is, to me, it's like every time I see the guy, it's half the ring entrance, half the angle, half the interview. Like, what about the wrestling? Where's the wrestling? Am I wrong? I don't know. I know a lot of hardcore fans just worship Jericho, but I don't see it. It's just, I get turned off to all the accessories. I just want to see these guys go toe-to-toe and work. A guy who really transcended the gimmick, Shawn Michaels.
Right.
He had the great gimmick, but then he got in the ring and he wrestled. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
He had the whole ring entrance and the dance and the costumes, but you know what? He got in the ring, and for 15 minutes he tore it up. And that's what the old school fans like myself like to see. You can do both. You can do both, but unfortunately, like a guy like Kane, it's like, I can't get past the gimmick. It's too much, It's like, it's too much. The explosions, the costumes, the whatever. I think I made my point, but,
Dan, you still there?
I am indeed, yes.
Dan fell asleep. Evan's doing a diatribe.
I'm just sitting here in awe, enjoying listening to the show.
I appreciate it.
You can tell I'm going to be playing this one back. So.
I appreciate it, and you could send all the hate mail to my website from the indie promoters. And well, I'll tell you honestly, over the years, for anybody that can't take constructive criticism, and that is what all of this is. I mean, for 13 years in my newsletter, for 10 years on New York radio, for 200,000 listeners on BAI in New York, and I'm not exaggerating. We have 50,000 watts, 200,000 listeners. I've put independent wrestlers on with no names and given them exposure. I love the wrestling business, which is why I, do get emotionally involved, and I get heated when I say I don't like this aspect of it. And, there are indie promoters who literally do not want to hear any constructive criticism about their promotion. They don't want to hear it. It's their world. They're the king. They're in control. They move the pieces. It's almost like a chess game. You know what I'm saying? And it's too bad, because I'll be sitting with a Johnny Valiant or a Nikolai Volkov, and they could be learning from these guys. I mean, Johnny could look at an act down to the guy's ring pants and say, you know, that doesn't fit the act or whatever. And they don't come to them. They don't want that feedback. They don't want that constructive criticism, for the most part. I mean, there are promoters that are totally open to it and totally humble. But for the most part, that's not the case. And, you know, it's like a writer. A writer needs to show his work to somebody else and get feedback, because you become too emotionally involved. You become too attached to it. And, you know, I've seen... I'm
a published journalist, so I actually know what you're talking about.
Yeah, sure. You know, you think the thing is done, and somebody else will look at it, and they'll say, well, you know, you could tweak this a little. You could, you know, this works better over here. And, you know, sometimes the indie promotions, it's almost like a diamond in the rough. And if they had the right people, you know, giving them feedback, they could, you know, really do something with it. And another thing, I know this is a whole different subject, and I know you guys are running out of time, so I'll make it quick. Promoters must promote. They do not promote. They put the thing on their website. The same people are going on the website. They need to get out there, hand out flyers, put up posters, get on internet radio shows, get on regular radio shows. You know, really... You know, do everything in their power to get the word out. Take out ads, put up posters. Remember the old school wrestling posters you used to see? Whatever happened to them?
I lived in New Jersey and New York for like 20 years of my life, and I remember I used to go to a hot dog stand, and there'd be like 5 wrestling posters. Come see, you know, at the time, because I'm the younger. Ivan Put, yeah, or Doink the Clown, or one of the 8,000 Doinks, yeah.
Exactly. You know, I've been to shows where there's literally, you know, 7 people paid. The entire audience is wrestlers and their girlfriends, you know?
Right.
And I mean, if you're going to go to this kind of trouble and heartache and stress to put on a show, you want people in the audience. And, I mean, I'm going through this right now, you know. I'm trying to promote Johnny's show. And, you know, I'm trying to fill 900 seats, 100 seats a night for 9 nights. And that may not sound like a lot, but for a comedy show, it is a lot. And we're just going out there, you know, literally 24 hours a day, just getting whatever publicity we can, because you want to fill those seats. You want it to be a success. I mean, some of the promoters are so concerned, you know, in the main event, I want, you know, the face to put me through the table. They're not out there trying to sell tickets. And that's why these promotions come and go. And I've seen it. I have seen friends. I have seen guys lose fortunes in this business. Fortunes, you know. And it's too bad. It's too bad because, you know, it's not an impossible thing to sell tickets to a wrestling show. It's a hustle. You really have to hustle. It can be done. You don't have to lose thousands every night. And, you know, I find it a shame that you'll see guys like Low-Key and Homicide, great talent on shows, and there's nobody there, you know? Nobody there. It's too bad. It's too bad. Anyway, that's my speech for the evening.
Well, this was actually, we got to be perfectly honest with you, this was about 1,000% better than we had expected. We honestly came in not knowing what to expect, and I think you blew us all away with this one. So we really appreciate your time.
I appreciate it, and I appreciate your time, and I appreciate your support, and you know, I hope you guys come out to the show, and I hope your listeners come out, and you know, stay in touch. You know, anything we could do for you, like I said, I'll be, you know, glad to get you some legends on your show, and you know, you guys are stand-up guys, you know.
If you guys ever go national, don't forget the Forgotten City of Phoenix.
Forgotten City of Phoenix.
Yeah, nothing ever comes here.
I have a writer, Dale Pierce. He's always writing about Phoenix wrestling.
Really? I didn't even know there was any.
Oh, yeah, Don Arnold. Dr. Death Arnold was the king of Phoenix wrestling. Dr. Death ended up at the Olympic Auditorium, and, you know, he wore a mask because he was a high school gym teacher. You know, he didn't want the kids to see him, so he put on this mask. He was a big draw. But yeah, Don Arnold is a. I know we're running out of time. I'll make this quick. Don Arnold is a 79-year-old nudist. He lives in a nudist colony in San Diego now, which is an interesting lifestyle, you know. Naked 80-year-old wrestlers. It's that's a story in and of itself. You want to interview an interesting guy? I'll give you Don Arnold's number sometime.
That'd be interesting. Sure. Why not? Why not?
Oh, this guy wrestled Gorgeous George and Rocker and everybody. He was around. He wrestled 36 years. Interesting guy. You know, there's a lot of guys out there that history is sort of forgotten. You know, but they could talk for 8 hours. They could tell you stories you wouldn't believe.
Well, this has actually been such a great interview, and we hope to have a lot of contact with you in the future to help us get this stuff done. And if you ever need to come on to promote anything else, you know, you're welcome to it.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Stay in touch.
Stay tuned for more from the interactive interview.
Hi, this is Michael Shane, and you're listening to the interactive interview.
Hey, welcome back. This is James Walsh flying solo. Daniel Edler's no longer with us. Dan had to go. It's got incredibly late. We apologize once again to Evan Ginzburg for taking so long to put his interview up, but I actually thought it was worthy of putting on this one, and since this is our comeback edition, since we're finally back after our prolonged absence from the website due to switching servers, thanks a lot to our former servers for giving us such a leeway with time. Assholes! Pardon me. We'd also like to thank Don Callis for joining us, and I'd like to play a new song for you. It's Dance of Death by Iron Maiden, and the album is called Dance of Death. And for anybody that's on the forums that does not like the music I've played, I admit that it's not for everybody, but that's partially why I like it. But if you can listen to this and say that these guys don't have any talent, then you're ignorant. So take a listen. This is called Dance of Death by Iron Maiden off the new album called Dance of Death.